Welcome back to Departure from Reality. This is our second episode, and this is part 2. We are very excited to be discussing this with no restrictions. Again, there will be lots of spoilers in this. So if you have not read the book, you probably might not know what we're talking about. So if you want to join us anyway, I think that's great. If you'd like to turn this off and read the book first, I also really recommend you doing that. We want you to read the book.
Please read the book.
So let's get into it.
So spoilers. I gotta be honest. Getting to this section, I feel like I can release like a knot of anxiety in my chest.
Right? It is so hard to hold back. And I feel like I was really quiet during that first section. And I mean, I kind of was. And it's because how do I explain all this without giving too much away to you guys?
The second half is going to be tough in and of itself because we're going to try to avoid spoiling books 2, 3, and 4.
Yes.
But it is going to be a lot easier to talk about than the first half.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, as many times as I've read these books, I still struggle to find a way to explain it to someone who's like, oh, what are you reading? What's that about?
Right?
It's like, it's good.
It's so good.
It's good.
Kaladin.
You like magic.
Yes.
Do you like cry?
Yeah.
Read, have both.
Exactly.
It's crazy the ability these books have to turn us into illiterate fools who don't know how to articulate.
There's so much in this book. I mean, we talked about how long it is. So it is one of those books that is just so hard to break down in a spoiler-free context. And even for like, you just want to give someone like a minute description of the book. There's no way you possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I hope people listen to that first little part because I mean, we want people to read it. This is an amazing book.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of book series just have a niche. Like, that's the thing. Like, the book is this thing.
Yeah.
And granted, the authors will quite often build around that thing, but at its core, it's that thing.
Mm-hmm. It's
not what the Stormlight Archive is.
Mm-mm.
It's not. It is a world.
Mm-hmm.
And these characters are, as fictional as they are real.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's insane to try and think of a way to explain this series without getting massively into detail. I mean, we definitely got a little bit into the weeds early on just by explaining the world that he built. And we hadn't even gotten to the good parts yet. So I'm a little bit worried personally that people aren't going to get past that. But if you did and you're here, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And let's get into the good stuff.
So what was your favorite magic scene in this book, and why was it the opening scene with Zeth?
So as much as I love the opening scene with Zeth, and it's really good. It's one of the best scenes in the entire series. I think my favorite magic scene in book 1 is probably the scene with the tower, actually, with Kaladin going to save Dalinar.
I mean, that's a really good scene.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to choose between the two because they're both so visually dynamic.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, when I listen to books, I'm constantly trying to think of like how this scene would look in a movie or a show adaptation. And if done right, both of those scenes would be just phenomenal.
So good. And I mean, Kaladin's scene would probably be just as good as you're thinking and why it's your favorite because of how much context we have leading up to the tower scene anyway. It's just everything compounding on that one moment, our biggest moment in this book. So I can see totally why that's your favorite.
Yeah, I think that is it's the context. It's everything that happens leading up to that.
Yeah.
The story arc behind Kaladin leading up to that scene. I mean, strip that away, just the two scenes. It's a tough choice.
It is. I guess I'm partial to the Zeth scene in the beginning because this is our first look at an experienced Stormlight user. Somebody who really understands how the magic works and how Stormlight works and how these lashings work. And so it's just a fun scene to think of in this book because it's the first time we get to see the magic truly in action. I mean, we kind of have to wait another book to really see Kaladin mature with his powers. So that's kind of why I'm more partial to the Zeth scene, just because it's fun to right off the bat see the magic system in motion.
Yeah, and for a series with such large books and kind of a slow burn when it comes to the momentum of the story really building, it's kind of a clever way to start the story by saying, this is what you're in for. It may take a bit to get back to this level of intensity, but just remember this.
Yep.
Like, this is what we're all about with this magic.
It's a nice little teaser for the magic system.
It's a really great way to open the book.
Yes, absolutely.
So, speaking of magic users, just going off of what we know in book 1,
it's clear that the people who can use use magic, with the exception of Zeth, who specifically talks about his magic being connected to his sword,
Yeah.
it seems clear that those who can use magic, these radiants, are connected to Spren.
Correct.
It's also clear that these individuals are traumatized in one way or another.
Yes.
So just how messed up do you think a person has to be before they can bond to Spren?
I often wonder if the trauma that I've had in my life, if, we had Spren in this world, would I be able to attract one? Could I be radiant?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard not to want to be radiant after reading
Right?
these books, but at the same time, like,
I mean, it's like one of those things, it's like, wow, these people have had such messed up lives, but look at the benefits now. I mean, they're radiant. They have these partners for life now, these friends, these best little friends who just get to follow them around. And
yeah. And that's not even getting into the magic they can then use after bonding their companion Spren.
Correct.
So lots of potentially good things there, just
Yes.
for the small price of traumatizing yourself.
I mean, how many people don't have childhood trauma? Come on.
I mean, yeah, that's fair.
I'm surprised everybody in Roshar isn't walking around with their own little pet Spren, okay?
Yeah. Speaking of the Spren, can we talk real quick about the way some of these Spren appear?
Oh, yeah.
Not just the normal Spren that we see about in the average everyday life of just a
Yeah.
normal person, like Fear Spren and Hunger Spren and all that, just popping up out of the ground.
Not the mindless Spren. You're talking about the
The-
Spren like Syl.
Yeah,
and-
the companion Spren.
Yeah.
Like, we've got Kaladin and Syl. It's basically like a Tinkerbell situation. She's floating around in the air, hanging out
Oh,
with
he's
him.
Peter Pan. Cute.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
He can fly.
except, yeah, well, different kinds of trauma. There's you can interpret Peter Pan in certain ways. So we've got Syl, who's basically Tinkerbell, which is fun, or Navi if you're a Legend of Zelda fan. And then on the other side of the world, we've got Shallan, who's basically in a horror movie,
Oh my gosh, you're so right.
just running down
Poor
the halls,
Shallan.
seeing invisible,
Oh,
terrifying monsters that only show up when she draws things without really paying attention to what she's drawing.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, Kaladin, he's got his own like demons that he's dealing with
Mhm.
personally, but
At
I mean,
least
he's
his
got
Spren.
this cute little
Yeah.
fairy who's like, yeah, she pulls little pranks on him from time to time, but I mean, they're harmless.
Mm-hmm.
But then, like, Shallan's literally being chased by monsters.
Yeah, if she wasn't traumatized before attracting the Spren, she might be after.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating the way different Spren.
Well, think of Elokar as well. I mean, he only briefly mentions it, like, towards the end of the book, how he sees the twisted symbols in, like, the mirrors and, like, kind of, like, the side of his eye, like his vision.
Yeah, and that's something that I didn't pick up on the first several times I
Me
read the book. I
either.
thought he was just paranoid because
Yes.
that's how he pitches it every time we talk about Elokar.
Yes.
But he does specifically say something about saying twisted symbols
He
in
says
the mirror.
symbols twisted in human.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that he's saying the same thing as Shallan,
Mm-hmm.
and we know what's happening with her, she's basically becoming a Radiant.
Well, yeah, I mean, she only sees them in her drawings
Mhm.
when she takes a memory of them and then sketches it. He sees them out of the corner of his eye in like mirrors and stuff.
And I wonder if there's some significance to that because she's constantly drawing.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always something that is in her life where she's viewing the world in a specific way, a specific format, and that's her drawing. Whereas Elokar is a little bit arrogant and prideful, I think.
Yeah, so a mirror kind of fits him better.
Kind of
You're
fits-
right.
Yeah. He's looking at himself,
Yeah.
preening himself, and
Yeah.
making sure he looks like a king. And so, yeah, it kind of fits the way that they appear, even though that they're the same thing. It fits the character. I
I mean,
like
yes,
that.
because they've had different lives, so it
Mhm.
makes sense, different traumas. I mean, even though they are kind of like connected through the whole father being murdered aspect of their trauma,
Yeah.
I mean, their lives have still been different. So I
Mhm.
guess seeing or, the first appearances of these Spren to them would be different.
Yeah. The circumstances leading up to their father's death.
Completely different.
It's
Yeah.
Circumstances afterwards different. So it's hard to see what exactly connects the two of them
Mhm.
in book one, but it's fascinating to sort of draw these lines and speculate about like what are these Spren that the
Mhm.
two of them can see? Like what is it that binds the two of them or what that connects the two of them?
The first time Shallan sees these symbol heads is when she is sketching King Taravangian. she isn't really paying attention to what she's doing because she's listening to the conversation that Yasna and the king are having.
Mhm.
And so she's just sketching, and all of a sudden she sees what she drew behind the king, this like twisted like shapes of the head or whatever.
Yeah,
And
but very clearly connected to some sort of body.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And like it was standing right behind the king.
Yeah.
And so, me not knowing anything about Stormlight the first time I read this, like nothing about the Spren and all of that, except for Syl, really, I thought that this had something to do with the king. I thought she was seeing something, I don't know, sinister about him. And it just kind of manifested in her drawing because she takes these memories and then she puts that onto paper. So I thought she was seeing something evil about the king.
I vaguely remember a conversation that we had when you were first going through book 1,
Yeah.
where you brought that up.
Yes.
And you said it was before anything had been confirmed from your read through about what those symbol heads were.
Yes.
And you were speculating, like I think something's going on with this Taravangian guy.
Yes, because even Yasna's like, he seems, because after the king left, he seems like down and like sad lately. Like there's something going on. Like Yasna made it very clear. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this king evil? Like, is that what we're seeing? Is that what Shallan's picture meant, that he's evil?
Yeah, and the fact that you had said that, and even though it's kind of shown that he is,
Yeah.
like those lines weren't connected at all, I was like, huh, that's interesting.
Yes.
Like, you made the connection even though the lines weren't really pointing in that way at all. Like, although I wonder if intentionally he was putting that there to
make us think there's more to the king than
Yeah.
we really think.
And then by the end of the book, we're sort of like, okay, it had nothing to do with the king. And then boom, go back to Zeth's perspective. And oh, snap, Taravangian is crazy evil.
Yeah.
It's like, we were right. He had nothing to do with the symbol heads, but whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of makes me wonder if he did that intentionally. And honestly, with the way he plans books out, I wouldn't be surprised if he did.
I wouldn't either. Yeah. But I thought that was, it was a fun conversation we
Yeah.
had back then.
And real quick, just going back to Kaladin and Syl, like, because I briefly mentioned the Tinkerbell comparison, the
yeah.
Navi connection comparison. I wonder Brandon Sanderson actually pulled some inspiration from that.
I mean, he might have. I mean, I could totally see Kaladin as kind of like a Link persona.
Mm.
I mean, he's out saving Hyrule, and Kaladin's out to save Roshar.
Yeah, it's just imagine Brandon Sanderson playing Zelda one day and thinking, what if?
I hope he plays Zelda.
That would be amazing.
Right? That'd
Yeah.
make me very happy.
Just playing Zelda, looking at Link and thinking, what if he was holding a spear and was way sadder than he, because Link looks very serious, but he doesn't look sad.
I don't know. I feel like he's sad. He never says anything. Poor
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah, I think there's some hidden depth there.
Well, seeing as Tears of the Kingdom is the reason it took us so long to get this episode out, it would make me very happy if he was a Zelda fan.
Yeah, that's true. Oh my gosh, we spent so much time on that game.
Yeah, and I still haven't beat Ganondorf, so let's not talk about that.
Yeah, well, you're taking your time. You're enjoying it.
Yeah.
I got to a point where I was like, okay, I could continue just doing all the side stuff, or I can go finish the main story.
Well, now I'm kind of hooked on Witcher, so I need to finish so I can go play Witcher again.
I forgot you started The Witcher. Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we talk about Stormlight itself for a minute?
Yeah, what's up?
Well, I love how this magic in this world is dependent upon Stormlight itself. It's an external source that fuels their powers. I mean, I know that we see this in some other books from time to time, but like it seems the rule for magic is the source just comes from the person itself.
Yeah, like a more internal, like mana type.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I just love how it's replenished by this storm that is constantly coming throughout all over Roshar. And so they're able to replenish their Stormlight quite frequently.
Mm-hmm.
But I just love that their power is based on Stormlight itself. You need it to fuel. And if you run out, that's it. You're done. Like, it doesn't exactly wear you out any. It's just, this is how much you have. Use it wisely.
Yeah. Brandon Sanderson definitely set up a theme with that sort of magic system for his Cosmere. Not to get too much into the spoiler territory of the Cosmere itself. There's definitely a theme of external sources of magic fueling someone using powers.
Oh, yeah.
But I think out of all of those external sources, Stormlight itself probably has the most unique character.
It's probably the easiest source to come by. I mean, I don't really want to get into any other books, but other books, they're kind of dependent. Like, on finding these resources. Whereas Stormlight just sweeps across the land, and if you have gemstones, you can fill it with Stormlight.
Yeah, it's a naturally renewable thing
Exactly.
that they have. It comes from such a volatile thing, the
Mm-hmm.
storm itself, that's sort of shaped the land. And so it's fascinating that the origin of this power comes from something so destructive.
Yeah.
And it's a really kind of poetic way to structure your magic system for a book. I really like it. It's a lot of fun.
Yes, I found it very unique and very interesting the first time I read it, and I loved it.
Backtracking a little bit again, I want to talk a little bit more about Zeth.
Cool. I love Zeth.
You remember that clip I sent you a few weeks ago, a month ago? I don't remember how long.
Are you talking about the Lego clip?
I am, yeah.
Oh, yes. I
Yeah.
remember that.
We're going to share it on our Facebook page when we post this episode.
Yeah.
Someone basically recreated the entire prologue from The Way of Kings with Lego. They animated it.
And it is so good. And it's like, it is broken down almost like verbatim how it's written.
Yeah, you could follow along with the book, and
Yeah.
every action that Zeth makes is in the animation, even though it's being portrayed by a little square blocky guy in a square blocky hallway fighting other square blocky individuals. It's very, very clear that he's doing exactly what's happening in the book, and it's a lot of fun.
Well, I have a new obsession and appreciation for Lego movies in general.
Mhm.
You know, having little boys. Never really cared about it before, but now I sit down and I watch all of them with them. And I would totally watch a full Stormlight movie made out of Legos. I would, and I would enjoy it, and I would love it, and my kids would love it, which is even better.
I mean, there is a discussion amongst fans about whether the adaptation of Stormlight Archive would be better live action or animated, but I don't think anyone has ever put forth the idea of let's
Lego.
do it in Lego.
Come on, let's do it, because then they would have like Lego recreations that you could buy and build of Stormlight.
That would be a lot of fun.
Oh my gosh, right?
I'm trying to think, because with Star Wars, you've got the ships. With Harry Potter, you've got like the castle and a few other weird things. But
You could recreate the tower scene. You could recreate the war camps.
okay,
The shattered
that's true. They
planes.
are getting into doing more like dioramas in
Mhm.
Lego.
Yeah.
So massive like dioramas, maybe not massive, but like dioramas
Yeah.
of scenes from the books. That would be really cool.
I think so.
Yeah.
The Chasm Fiend.
Chasm Fiend would be a lot of fun.
Right?
Speaking of which, I think the creator who made that Lego clip of Zeth prologue scene actually has made a few other scenes from the book in Lego.
And you haven't shared them?
I briefly stumbled across them and then forgot to send them. Yeah.
That's cool. I'll remember that.
It's kind of cool. One of them, it does show a chasm fiend crawling across a plateau and then dropping down into a chasm. And the way they made the chasm fiend was kind of eerie, and it was just in Lego. And I was like, okay, that's like, it's one thing to read about a chasm fiend and sort
Yeah.
of picture it mentally, but to actually see a visual representation of it and know that like this is very accurate to how it's described. Seeing all the legs that they talk about the chasm fiend having, like was it like 17 or 16 legs or something crazy.
Yeah.
It's kind of eerie. It's a massive bug.
Okay, we're going to have to find this because I want to see it. And once we find it, I will share this along with the clip of
Okay.
Zeth on our Facebook page. Since we're on the conversation of Zeth, I want to talk about his insanity and how we see the differences between when he kills Gavilar versus when he kills the princes of Yakaved.
5 years apart, yeah.
They're 5 years apart, and we don't see the 5 years in between. We get little glimpses of what his life has been like through the interludes,
Mhm.
but we don't see that time. We get to see basically a very stark difference between the Zeth who killed Gavilar and the Zeth who killed the High Princes. I mean, when he killed Gavilar, he was almost remorseful for what he was doing in a way. I mean, he even wrote out a letter for Dalinar when Gavilar asked him, tell my brother to find the most important words a man could say. And he wrote it in Gavilar's blood. This is a man who would not have done that for any of the High Princes that he killed 5 years later.
Yeah, that's true. There's a pretty clear difference in his mental state between the prologue scene and the later scenes where he's being forced to assassinate the princes of Yakaved.
There's a point when he is trying to kill Gavilar, when he's chasing everybody through the halls, where he compares his shard blade to just being a tool. It can't be blamed for the murders because it's just a tool. And I took this as him comparing himself basically to a shard blade. He is disassociating himself from what is happening because, he's just a tool. He can't be blamed for any of this, just like the shard blade can't be blamed for any of this. So I looked at this as him in the first steps of disassociating himself from what he was doing as not being at fault. Because 5 years later, he blames his victims, the high princes of Yaakoved. And so I guess I see him as comparing himself to just being a tool, just doing what he was told.
Interesting. I remember the line you're talking about, and I kind of interpreted that a little bit differently.
Oh, okay.
Because Zeth, the way I've always sort of interpreted his character is he holds very strongly to his beliefs, his cultural beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
And he believes, even though what made him a truthless was something that he actually held to and he actually did believe, once he was made a truthless, he didn't question that either. Like, that was who he was now. And since he holds so strongly to the customs of his people, he, I think, believes that as a truthless, every murder that he commits is on him. It's his weight to bear. That's his punishment for being a truthless. And I think the line where he says the shard blade can't be blamed is him taking credit for the murders. He's saying that because the shard blade is just a tool, it can't be blamed. I'm the one doing this.
See, okay, I can totally see where your point is, and to some extent, I kind of agree. But because he was raised Shin his entire life, and their values, if you have to kill, you've already failed, that's going to resonate with him so deeply, I believe, that I do really think that he wants to disassociate from what he's doing and cast the blame elsewhere. He's going to do what he's told, but I do believe in his mind that he thinks he's just a tool.
I'm not sure, because I feel like one of the reasons he starts to go kind of mad at the end
Mm-hmm.
and starts to hear the screams of his victims is because he blames himself. He thinks he's at fault for all of these deaths, and so that weighs on him.
And that could be very well why he does go mad, but it also could be the disassociation from so many years that turned him that way as well.
It could. Huh.
So I don't know. There's different ways to look at it.
Yeah, I'd never looked at it that way at all. I just interpreted it my own way, and that's how I saw it.
That's fair.
Now, moving away from Zeth, kind of want to talk about the main characters a little bit.
Yeah, let's do it.
My favorite character out of the three main characters is probably Dalinar.
It's a good character.
There's something about Dalinar's journey that I resonate with for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this idea in stories,
Mhm.
books, movies, whatever, that a quote-unquote goody two-shoes style character is boring. And for the most part, I would agree.
Yeah.
And at face value, that's kind of what Dalinar comes across as.
Mhm.
He has these codes that he's very strictly adheres to. He forces his men and his sons to adhere to them. And he is criticized throughout the entire book by the other Alethi High Princes and by other Alethi in general for being very sanctimonious and sort of full of himself.
Yeah. Very unalethi.
Yeah. But there's more to him than just being just a good guy, just a rule-following dude. I mean, this is a man who was raised in war.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he talked about him and his brother forging the Alethi princedoms together in this book and the amount of bloodshed that took, and how in his youth he had very few inhibitions. But now this older, grown-up Dalinar, he's sort of taken a look at his own life and realized that that's not who he wants to be, that there is something that needs to change, and that something is inside of him. That's sort of his journey. His journey is growth and change. And the fact that he's not just doing the right thing, quote unquote, to do the right thing, he's doing it because he thinks that that's what he needs to do to be a better person.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of relate to that. The journey to
Better
just-
yourself.
Exactly.
I mean, how many of us, I hope there's a lot of us out there who think back to our young selves or 20-something-year-old selves or teenage selves and the things we said and did and kind of are embarrassed about it and think, I would never in a million years say that. Like, I could think of things I've even posted on Facebook in my early 20s about, like, what the heck? Who was I back then?
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm glad for that because it shows how far I've come as a person, how much my views and ideas have changed and grown over time, and that I haven't just stayed stagnant, and that I am a different person, and I think I've changed for the better.
Yeah, there's a scene in the book when one of the other high princes, Sadeas, says something to Dalinar, challenging Dalinar on the codes that he follows, on the things that he does now.
Yeah.
And asking him, does he not feel passion anymore? Does he not feel like bloodlust on the battlefield anymore?
Yeah,
Does he
the
not feel
thrill.
the thrill of battle? Dalinar says, I've got it written down here, I want to read it out. It says, I feel each of the things you mentioned, Sadeas, but I don't always let them out. A man's emotions are what define him, and control is the hallmark of true strength. To lack feeling is to be dead, but to act on every feeling is to be a child.
I mean, how important of a lesson is that for all of us in life? It's something I, as a mother, am trying to instill in my children that, we all have feelings. And those feelings aren't just happiness, they're anger and sadness. We get mad. And, that is okay because we're human and we're going to feel those things. And it's important to recognize those feelings for what they are and also recognize what is happening outside of us to be causing those feelings so we can, fix it. But part of being human is to learn to control these emotions, that we can't act upon every single thing we feel. I mean, it took Dalinar to his probably 40s, 50s to figure this out.
Yeah.
And that's why I think it's important to raise our children this way so it doesn't take them their whole lives to figure out how to control their emotions and not let them define you.
Yeah. One of the reasons it took Dalinar so long to start questioning this and start seeking out this kind of a change is because that's part of the Alethi culture.
Very true.
The change that he's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the Alethi they don't understand where he's coming from with this.
Well, think about our own culture and how, boys are raised that they don't cry. As a boy, you can't cry because you're a boy. And so you as men are taught that you can't feel those types of emotions because they're not manly enough.
Yeah.
And so you all are all now in your 30s and 40s trying to I do feel those emotions and I felt them my entire life and it's okay. So, I mean, I think every culture has a way that we've kind of repressed feelings in certain ways.
Yeah.
Telling kids that you can't be angry right now. You can't be mad at that. That's wrong. No, don't tell someone how their emotions and their feelings are supposed to be. Those are theirs.
Yeah. It's a pretty good comparison because both of those are very culturally steeped.
Yeah.
It's those types of toxic cultural traits that are perpetuated through the generations that Dalinar is trying to break free of and that a lot of us are trying to break free of. That's one of the reasons why I connect with him so strongly.
That's fair. I think Dalinar probably has the most quotable character. He's got a bunch of different monologues in this. And to me, they are very reminiscent and comparable to Tolkien's monologues that he has for some of his characters. Particularly, I think, Aragorn and Gandalf. Yeah,
I can see that as well. The comparison between his monologues is quotes and a lot of the things that some of the heroes in Tolkien's work says. One of the two I like to compare personally is his speech at the Tower and King Theoden's speech at the beginning of the Battle of Pelennor Fields.
Okay, yeah.
Motivating his men, basically telling them this is a day when a lot of us are probably going to die.
Yeah.
But how we meet that end is the important thing. And
oh, dude, you just gave me goosebumps. Both of those scenes, they're playing out in my head together as you said it. And to be facing certain death like that, it's got to be just so daunting. Yeah. And then to have your commander just come and give you this, we're probably not going to make it, but we're going to meet this.
We're going to meet it head on.
We're going to meet it head on, and we're going to do it together. And we're going to show them that the means by which we live and die are not up to others, but up to us.
Yeah. Again, another good reason to love Dalinar. He's very passionate. He's very emotional.
I found a quote. Actually, I found a bunch of quotes because, like I said, he is very quotable. But I liked this one. He says, "Sometimes the prize is not worth the cost. The means by which we achieve victory are as important as the victory itself."
Yeah, I remember that quote as well. I actually remember when he says that in the book, he's in a room with a bunch of other Alethi, and there are audible gasps from the other Alethi in the room.
I mean, he's quoting from The Way of Kings, so this isn't something that he came up with himself.
Yeah, and I think someone else in the room at that time quotes a different scripture that the majority of the Alethi worship, written by, I think, the Sunmaker.
Yeah, I think so.
One of Dalinar's ancestors, where they basically say the prize is worth any cost. The means to an end, they can be anything, as long as you achieve that end. That's another one of those cultural traits of an Alethi that Dalinar is trying to grow out of and change from.
And on that same token, another quote, I mean, it happens several chapters later, towards the end of the book, but he says, "In the end, I must proclaim that no good can be achieved of false means, for the substance of our existence is not in the achievement, but in the method." How you lived, how you treat others, matters way more than how much you worked, or how much you earned, or how big your house is, or how nice your car is. At least that's what I got out of it.
I got a similar vibe. from this quote as well. It's all about the quality of a person's life, the content of that life,
Yeah.
and not the things of quote unquote monetary value
Yeah.
that you can take away from that life. So a person who dies with several $billion in their bank account but no friends around their bed.
It kind of shows you the measure of a life.
Yeah, whereas someone who was penniless to the day they died but are surrounded by friends and family, two completely different lives.
Yeah.
And you can't take wealth with you, so you might as well
leave a better legacy.
Yeah. Both of those two quotes, though, if you kind of look at them, they both kind of similar.
They have the same theme.
Yeah.
That theme would be
life before death,
strength before weakness,
journey before destination.
I mean, it kind of makes you wonder, when he was writing all of these quotes, did he just keep a journey before destination booklet next to him?
How many different ways can I write out this one quote?
Kind of like Spider-Man's with great power comes
great responsibility. Yeah. How many different ways can they say the same thing?
Exactly.
Oh, man. And these are just two quotes. I guarantee there are dozens.
There's so many others. I mean, those just stood out to me because they, sparked a conversation.
That's the theme of the book, though.
Yeah.
The quality of your life and what that should sort of be. And so it makes sense.
Yes.
It's just funny that two of his best quotes that we found back to back are basically just life before death, just rewritten.
Yep.
So it's good stuff.
You mentioned that Dalinar is your favorite main character out of the three. And for me personally, in this book, I find myself kind of drawn to Kaladin. His continuous battle with his own mind is something that is very relatable to me. With depression, you kind of live your life just with a bunch of ups and downs. The ups can last for up to years at a time, or you could be great. And then all of a sudden you find yourself at a very low point. And sometimes you can feel it coming on, but other times you don't realize that you're sinking super low. But like with everything, you kind of have to hit that really low point before you can come back up again.
Yeah, and the first part of this book is sort of Kaladin's descent to that lowest point.
Yeah.
That point being when he goes to the honor chasm and he's about to commit suicide. And it's one of the reasons why rereading this book is so difficult, because it takes a while to get through that first part, and it's tough. He makes you feel Kaladin's despair. And then basically him giving up and going to the honor chasm and deciding this is it, I'm killing myself. It's a rough way to start a book, but also kind of a promising way to start a book, because from that point you can only go up. And while it's still technically a roller coaster, ups and downs, that's his lowest point.
Yeah.
I guess from that perspective, there's a more positive way to look at it.
It makes you feel hopeful.
Yeah.
And it makes you remember the times that, at least for me, that I had those upward moments where I was coming out of very dark times and very dark days, and how much better you feel at those moments. And it makes you feel that for Kaladin.
Yeah, it reminds you that it is possible to come out of those
Yes.
depths.
It's hard to remember when you're in the depths, but when you're out of them, you're so grateful you made it out of them.
Yeah, and sort of what pulled Kaladin out, I mean, obviously Syl was what pulled him out, but she convinced him to try again, to try and save the Bridgeman. His whole life is sort of centered around helping people, and every time he does, he fails in a way, which is what sort of led him to the honor chasm in the first place.
Yeah.
And she convinces him, what's one more try? And so he does. He gives it one more try. And so that's where the story starts to pick up, I feel.
And he gives it another try. And while it seems like he's made it out of those depths, for the most part, he is still kind of faking it. And I do feel like a lot of times that's how it is with depression. You fake it until you make it.
There are moments where he says that specifically, like that the evenings when he's trying to get the Bridgeman to join him around the fire with Rock Stew. He says, basically, in his own internal monologue, he says that he's forcing himself to smile and be genial and invite people in. And we can kind of see it's not how he feels in that moment. It's not genuine, but he's trying.
And honestly, it really is just something that you don't know what is going to kick you out of the funk that you're in, the current mood that you're in. You don't know what's going to do it. So you just have to keep trying until something does, until you feel like yourself again.
That form of trying doesn't necessarily have to come in forcing yourself to smile and interact and be friendly at social situations. That's what Kaladin needed to do, because he was trying to help the Bridgeman. The form of
Just
moving
getting out of
forward.
bed every day
Yeah.
is trying. Brushing your teeth, combing your hair, maybe even just taking a shower. Those simple things that seem like such simple things, but when you are in the depths are the hardest things in the world. Those are you taking a step forward
Hmm.
and doing your best.
And any step forward is progress.
Exactly.
One thing that I really appreciate about Kaladin's chapters is the way he thinks things through. He's both a soldier and a surgeon,
Yeah.
and we can kind of see his mental processes on both of those fronts. When he's helping the injured bridgeman after a run, we see him mentally thinking his way through treating an injury, treating a wound. Whereas those moments of confrontation when he's about to be struck by a soldier, we see him very, very quickly analyzing the situation, determining how he would be able to take down the opponent if he wanted to.
Yeah.
He's a very methodical thinker. And that's one of the things I appreciate about his chapters. He's got a very distinct mental thought process that Brandon Sanderson is very meticulous about laying out.
Well, I think that this thought process comes from the question he constantly asks himself. Can you kill to protect? And I think that's kind of like a battle he's having in his mind because his father raised him that no, you can't kill to protect. That's not possible.
Yeah, there are two types of people, those who kill and those who protect.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
so he's fighting with himself. And this is kind of like how us as adults were raised a certain way by our parents, where we have to decide for ourselves is how I was raised. Is that how I'm going to live my life? Or did I find a different way to do it that's just as good? I feel like he's having kind of a battle with himself. So that's why he sees someone wounded and he immediately knows how he would take care of them and maybe even jumps in to do it, while also knowing how to completely disarm somebody to save himself.
Yeah, I feel like that question drives his quest for self-identity in a way.
Yeah.
Like you were saying, the idea that you are either a killer or a protector, you can't be both, was drilled into him from his youth by his dad. And those ingrained beliefs are things that are very hard to shake. And so he's constantly questioning himself as a soldier and as someone who was raised to be a surgeon. Can I kill to protect? And it's a conflict inside of him that I think makes him condemn himself a lot of the time.
Yes.
As someone who can't protect anyone. And not only just because he's failed to protect so many people, from his perspective at least, but because he finds himself drawn to the life of a soldier. And so there's a lot of self-condemnation through his perspective. Kaladin's a great character. There's a lot of self-flagellation there. He beats himself up a lot.
Well, I think a lot of this stems from the first person he couldn't protect, who is his brother. I think that's where his big desire to save others who can't save themselves comes from. I mean, he watched his brother die after joining the army
to protect him.
Yeah. I mean, their relationship, we get to see that through his POV. We get to see their entire relationship growing up and how Tien was one of the people who could bring Kaladin out of his moods.
Yeah.
And how he would help him through his dark times. And really without Tien even knowing. It's just who Tien was.
He just did it. It's just who he was.
Honestly, I think that's kind of how it is growing up with siblings. We might have gotten on each other's nerves a lot and we might have fought. But honestly, there was no one who could have brought me out of a mood faster than one of you guys. We kind of had a pretty close relationship growing up, even though we were 6 years apart in age.
Yeah.
We've always been able to connect on these levels.
Yeah.
And these are the things that would bring us, at least me, out of the moods I was in.
Yeah, from that perspective, I can kind of understand his journey of getting thrown into the sort of the darkness after he watched his brother die. Because I don't know how I would survive watching one of my siblings die, especially after putting myself in a position to try and protect that sibling.
Well, while I've never been in a position where I have to protect my sibling, I have been in a position where I thought a sibling was going to die. And it's a lot of sleepless nights. It's a lot of praying and hoping that everything's going to turn out okay. And honestly, it's one of the worst feelings in the world.
And now for the final of our three main characters, Shallan.
Yes, I love Shallan. I find her character to just be tenacious in her ability to just pursue what she wants and get it.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can only really talk about this book.
Yeah.
But that is her personality.
That's the very first thing we see from her. Her 3 different attempts to try and get Yasna to take her on as her ward.
Yeah.
And granted, there was some context motivating that tenacity, but even then, it's pretty impressive the lengths to which she was willing to go to try and get this woman to take her on as a ward. While it's not as dynamic a character intro as a battle, it's a really good way to introduce a character.
Well, I am a very introverted person. So to
Yeah,
watch
me too.
her fail time after time to get the wardship, but continue to try, I don't relate to that at all. Because if somebody told me no once, I'd be like, okay, thank you for your time. I'm like, so sorry I wasted any of your time. I'm going to go back to my room and never come out of it again. And so to watch her continue to push forward and be like, well, I'm going to try this way. For me, I'm like, what are you doing? Get out of her alcove. Why are you there? Like, this is awful. This is a horrible idea. But the way she just persists is, I don't know, it's inspiring to people like me.
Yeah, I'm introverted as well, but I think contextually, if I were in a similar situation, I don't know if I would be inclined to follow my introverted instincts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you may be selling yourself short a little bit as well.
I don't know. I think I'd return home with my tail between my legs. I tried so hard.
Yeah, I don't know. You're a bit more tenacious than I think you're giving yourself credit for. Because you think until we're put in those situations, we can't quite know how we would react.
I guess you're right.
Our natural inclination is to just be like, all right, thank you, have a good life, and leave.
Yeah.
But when we're on the ropes like Shallan is with life, I think the desire to try again,
Mm-hmm.
it's either this or oblivion, basically,
Yeah.
which is what she was basically assuming would happen with her family. Then we can't really know if we would give up or not.
That's true.
So speaking of Shallan, I did want to talk about a very specific chapter from her perspective.
Okay.
The alleyway scene.
Oh, yes.
With her and Yasna.
Oh, I love this scene so much.
Yeah. And it's kind of pitched in a way that feels like there would be a lot of debate around it, and perhaps there is.
Maybe.
I mean, I'm not entirely sure if there is any sort of discourse around this topic, but I'm pretty sure from conversations we've had, we're sort of on the same page with this.
Yasna was right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with what she did 100%.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, granted, there is some sort of like moral, like, ugh,
but is
to
there really
seeking out someone you're killing.
But she wouldn't have killed them if they hadn't even approached her. If she was just able to walk through that alleyway, regardless of what her intentions were, if she walked all the way through that alleyway and nothing happened, that would have been the end of it.
Yeah.
It's the fact that they approached her. I believe she was 100% right for what she did.
Yeah, I think my only reticence comes from if I were in Yasna's shoes, would I have the fortitude to seek out people who I fully believed deserved to die?
Yeah.
I don't know if I could, but Yasna does have that fortitude. She put herself in that situation and she got business done. Shallan, on the other hand, is mortified by it all, which is fair. She's young and hasn't dealt with anything on that scale before.
I mean, besides her father.
Yeah, but Shallan is very good at ignoring things that happened in her past.
Very true.
And so, yeah, there's a bit of a debate between her and Yasna, or I guess not so much a debate as Shallan's upset and Yasna tells her to research her feelings.
Yes. Yeah. I don't know. I would really be interested to know if there's anyone else out there who sides with Shallan on this.
Yeah.
And I would like to know your reasoning why.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting to me how Shallan acted because to me, they deserved everything they got.
Yeah, I mean, granted, in this particular format, we're not exactly bringing up the full context of the chapter and what happens in that situation for obvious time-related reasons.
And we're assuming you know what we're talking about.
Yeah, so it doesn't exactly shed the best light on our opinions right now. It kind of sounds like we're endorsing
murder. Go reread the chapter and it'll be fresh in your mind.
Yeah, it's something that we're very passionate about. Like, these are not good people that she killed.
Yeah.
And maybe there's additional context to be added to those people's lives.
Maybe, but if you're killing and possibly even raping women, I'm sorry, you forfeited your life.
Yeah, it's hard to really sympathize with them in that situation at all. Yasna had the means, the ability, and she did it.
And it wasn't like she did it after it happened one time. This was a continuous problem.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why I'm like, okay, like it wasn't a one-off thing. Maybe these people did it on accident, you know, like a mugging went too far or whatever.
They had a system in place.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I kind of want to get serious for a second.
Okay.
All right. So Yasna is considered a heretic. And there's this common belief that if you don't believe in God, you don't really know what's right and what's wrong. I mean, in the Christian community.
Right, yeah.
So if you're an atheist, you're just a bad person because you don't know how to live your life.
Yeah,
And
that's the belief.
yeah. And Yasna is met with this a lot. She
Mhm.
has a whole conversation with King Taravangian about it. And she's like, well, why is my moral compass basically not good enough to decide what's right and wrong? Why do I need a higher being to come down and spell it out for me?
Mm-hmm.
And we're all born with a conscience. So we are able, with religion aside, to decide for ourselves what is right and what is wrong. Outside of religion, killing is wrong.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
that's just
independent of that.
independent of religion.
Yeah, right and wrong exists outside of any sort of deity.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of religions don't believe that. We don't want to start bashing on religions,
No,
obviously.
that's not what we're trying to do.
But it is a very interesting topic that he expands through Yasna in these books
Mm-hmm.
with her quote-unquote heresy. That if you are a moral person,
Mm-hmm.
it's because you believe in God and you follow God's tenets.
Yeah.
I find the way Yasna explained it to be almost hopeful. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, she didn't have faith in a god so much as she had faith in the human spirit.
Exactly. She has faith in her brother and her uncle's abilities and, their desire to rule their countries, basically. And I don't know, I think that's perfect. Even inside of a religion, you have to have these kind of faiths anyway,
Yeah.
So she did describe it perfectly, I think.
It's one of the reasons why Yasna is probably in my top 3 favorite characters.
Mm-hmm.
Her story, where she's constantly having to defend her beliefs,
Mm-hmm.
or I guess lack of beliefs, depending on your perspective.
Depending on your perspective, exactly.
It's one of the reasons why I love her story, because she's very staunch about it and she's very capable of defending her position.
Yes, and when people ask questions, they're almost scared to ask questions.
Mm.
When in reality, people aren't offended by curiosity, for the most part. There are several people out there who are like, well, why don't you research it for yourself? When in reality, like, why can't we just have a conversation about it? And so I see nothing wrong with curiosity when people want to ask you questions about your religion or lack of religion or whatever. And she feels the same way. I don't care if you ask me and I'm just going to answer how I answer, like you can take it or not. Her conversations on this really make you think. And I really enjoy reading them, especially when she talks to Shallan. And Shallan's like, well, you're discounting my feelings on the matter, the things I have personally felt regarding religion.
Mm.
And she's like, I'm not, though. But you can't make your feelings truth because I've had different feelings.
Yeah.
And I think it's so true. And while there's so many different religions out there, because everybody has different feelings on the matter, and your feelings cannot be somebody else's feelings. You cannot convert somebody because of the feelings that you have personally had.
Yeah, from my personal perspective, I stopped going to church several years ago, and there was a lot of soul searching I was
Mhm.
doing to try and figure out things for myself and find out how I actually felt about certain things. And I came across this line of thinking fairly early on, probably a year or so before I started reading these books, actually. The idea that morality is independent from religion
Yeah.
and can exist outside of a belief in God. By way of explanation, I found that out through comedian Bo Burnham.
Oh, I love Bo Burnham.
He's pretty good.
He is.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot more people know him because of his the special he put out during the pandemic.
Yeah.
In one of his earlier specials, he has a song called "From God's Perspective," where he sort of jokingly sings a song literally from the perspective of God talking to human beings, where he says things like, "You shouldn't abstain from pork just because you think that I want you to. You can eat pork because why the hell would I care?" or something like that. Like in that vein of, if I exist, surely I have better things to do than to regulate the things that you eat and the things that you say. He has another line in there that is a bit more extreme.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't abstain from rape just because you think that I want you to. You shouldn't rape because rape is a fucked up thing to do.
Right.
It's like...
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's sort of how I felt. Like, if you need a god to come down and tell you something as elementary as that, the problem isn't external at that point. It's you. If you need a god to tell you you shouldn't rape people because it's bad, without you realizing that it's already bad, there's a problem there. That was something for me that I resonated with very early on. And so to find that touched on again in this book, I immediately connected with Yasna.
And I totally get that. While I believe you and I were not raised by our parents to believe that way, we were just taught what was right from wrong. It wasn't, this is a commandment God gave us, so this is what we follow. But the feelings are different when you go to church. The way they teach and the way they make you feel are very different from how our parents raised us.
Yeah.
So while the church is very ingrained, I believe in we do this because God has asked us to do it. I never remember once being raised to think I'm doing this because God asked me to. No, it was just I don't steal that candy from the store because stealing is wrong. You know, I can't hit my friends because I'm angry because hitting others is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And we're all born with a conscience. It is there. And it is up to us as parents to help cultivate this conscience in a child and help it grow. So when they are older, they can use that conscience to help them decide right from wrong.
Like you were saying, when we were basically taught what
Mhm.
morality was as kids, we weren't taught it through the lens of religion. We
Yeah.
were just taught this is right and wrong, this is
Mhm.
what that means. And that was sort of just ingrained in who we are. And then we'd go to church, and right and wrong was then taught through the lens of
God,
religion.
yeah.
And it was a little bit jarring.
Yeah.
And for years, it was hard to sort of disconnect what we were taught from our parents and what we were taught at church, because they're very similar. And at the
Mhm.
same time, like, but wait, we weren't actually told that right is right because God said it's right and
Yeah.
wrong is wrong because God said it's wrong. Like,
No, I was raised being told that I am born with a conscience and to trust my conscience and my gut feeling when being out in the world by myself. That's how my parents raised us.
it's one of the reasons we resonate with Yasna.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Yes. Like, while I personally am not an atheist, I do believe that there is a God. I do believe that right and wrong stand outside of God.
yeah.
They exist because they do.
Mhm.
Right and wrong they just are. And you know what it is. And going off of this whole conversation that we broke off into based off of one small little blip of Yasna, it leads me into one of my favorite quotes from this book, maybe I think from any book, probably ever. And it's from Wit, our beloved Wit. He
Yes.
says, "The purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think upon. Too often we forget that." And our whole podcast is based off this one quote. And I didn't really think about that until we started prepping for this episode. And I came across this quote and I'm like, oh my gosh. I mean, this is basically our life. We read a story and then you and I just dissect the crap out of it. We talk about how something made us feel or what it made us think of. And, there might be people out there listening to this podcast thinking, well, they said this, but I felt this way about it. And that is wonderful. Because we're not here to tell you how to think about these chapters. We're just here to have a discussion and maybe help you think about things in a different way and maybe even think of your own ideas. And that's exactly what stories are meant for, is to raise questions and have you think upon them and have you think about morality. And maybe nothing as deep as morality, just something as silly as how Zeth uses his powers or his insanity. Just I felt so deeply about this. I was like, I'm going to share this because our entire podcast is built upon this one quote.
Yeah, it's an idea that I think we just sort of ingrained without thinking too much about it.
Yeah.
It's fun to sort of reread that and be like, oh yeah, duh. Like that's sort of where we were the whole time anyway. I also find this quote sort of to be a kind of good rule of thumb for younger readers who are just sort of starting out, getting into more and more books. Because I kind of feel like the younger you are, the more
impressionable.
The more impressionable you are, the more likely you are to read a book and take a character that you resonate with and sort of adapt their ideas of morality to your own, which isn't necessarily in and of itself a bad thing.
No, as long as, their sense of morality is on the good side.
Yeah. But then we're getting into the discussion of what is objectively good and bad.
You're right. Let's not do that.
But I think it is a good thing to keep in mind when you're a young reader and you're starting out and you're getting into more and more books. Like, these books weren't written to tell you how to think a certain way, how to feel a certain way. They're meant to make you question things.
Yeah. And that's so good. Take those questions and talk to somebody about them, or find other books that also bring up these questions and read them. Don't go and think, oh, well, this is telling me one thing. This is now how I'm going to live my entire life. No, think about it.
Yeah.
Ponder it.
Yeah. And books, no matter how well written, they can be wrong sometimes.
They can.
So question everything, really, that you're reading.
Especially if you are reading a book of fiction.
Yes. A book of fiction, a book of fantasy fiction.
Yes.
Because maybe the stuff they're talking about doesn't even really apply to our world.
Exactly.
So Don't take anything as gospel when you're reading fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Take them as ideas to think upon. Like you said, that's sort of what our podcast is sort of structured around. Like, we're just taking these ideas, we're thinking about it, we're talking about it, and we're hoping other people are enjoying that and doing the same.
And I want you guys to share your thoughts with us. Like, if you found that whole discussion we had about Zeth and his insanity, if you see a whole nother light to it that we didn't see ourselves, I want to hear about it.
Yeah.
I want to see how many different ways there are to think about things.
Yeah.
And the debate with Yasna and Shallan about the people she killed in the alleyway, I want to hear your thoughts on that too. These are the kind of discussions we love to have. We might be having them with each other, but I want to have them with you guys as well.
Yeah, it would be incredible to be able to have episodes down the road where we just spend a good amount of time responding to comments or questions from people who have listened to the episodes.
Yes.
That would be great.
It would. We would love that so much.
Yeah, I think that brings us to the end, the official end of episode 2.
If you listen to both of these episodes, both parts of episode 2, you're amazing. Thank you for sticking through it with us. If you just listen to this one, you're still amazing. And thank you for sticking through with us.
If you listen to this one first and you want to know what the first one was about, we basically covered a brief synopsis of The Way of Kings without spoiling too much.
Yes, it was kind of like a book report. Maybe
Kind
not
of.
as dry.
Hopefully not
Hopefully
as dry.
not as dry.
Yeah, done to sort of inspire people who haven't read it to read it.
Or if they want to know more about it, they could jump into hopefully this one
Yeah.
and maybe follow along a little bit better.
Yeah. But if you have read the books and you're still curious, please, by all means, listen to it. I'm sure there are plenty of things that we left out of that episode
Oh, I'm sure.
that we could have included. So please, either scathingly or very nicely, let us know what we forgot.
Yeah. And we can include it in our next Stormlight podcast.
Yes, we do plan to continue doing more episodes about Stormlight. The next Stormlight book, obviously, will be Words of Radiance.
Our next episode will actually be The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien. We're going to follow our Lord of the Rings conversation again.
Yeah, so we hope you guys tune in for that.
Thank you so much. We appreciate you guys.
Goodbye.
See you next time.